Hey viewers, my name's Kara. I'm your host for Tuesdays on Pagan Perspective, and this week we're talking about paganism and its relationship with Eastern philosophy. This topic comes from Rain. It will be in the description as usual. Rain's been recently studying Buddhism and Shinto extensively and has been pagan for a little over 10 years, and notes that Buddhism and Eastern philosophies don't have anything against paganism, but there are some things that they are coming up against that seem to be contradictory, and they're finding themselves bouncing between two very different types of practices, as they put it, and they're looking for any advice that we can give about finding balance between their pagan beliefs and their Eastern practices and philosophies. So I will say first that with both of these things, with both paganism and the group known as Eastern philosophies, whether it be Buddhism, Shinto, Confucianism, Taoism, anything like that, with both of those groups, there is the ability to follow them very closely as a religion, even though the Eastern philosophies aren't always considered religions or aren't ever considered religions. It depends on who you ask. But they can be followed really extensively as a religion, or they can be used just for their practices and be combined with different beliefs. To some people this doesn't make sense, because as Rain is pointing out that they're finding, not everything goes really well together. But there are lots of blended paths out there that people have been able to put together and come up with and make work. And it's not always easy because there are some things that are really conflicting, things that appear to be opposing, but there are also things that can work together. It depends on what your personal belief is. For example, Rich probably speaks more to this and probably did speak more to this in his video this week. I haven't watched it yet, but Rich is a Christo-pagan, and there are other people who are Christo-pagans or Christian Wiccans or Christian witches. There are also Jewish witches. There are people who believe that those things are absolutely impossible to make coincide, and yet a lot of people are able to do it. This may even also just be related to the fact that some people work with or worship or have an attunement with deities from different pantheons and different cultures. Not everyone thinks that this blending of faiths or working with multiple pantheons or any of that is a good thing or that it makes sense. Some people believe that you shouldn't do these things. You know, they would say you're coming up across conflicts and difficulties because these things don't go together. You can't do both. But again, I think these are very personal things and very capable of being made your own. With Buddhism specifically, I don't know a lot about the full extent of Buddhism, but even just some of the main tenets, there are some that I feel coincide really well with my personal beliefs, and I tend to use those things within my own life and on my own path. And then there are other things that I don't so much agree with, and so I don't use those things in my path. So I usually tell people, you know, I agree with a lot of Buddhism, but I also disagree with a lot of Buddhism. And if I agreed with all of it, then I would just be Buddhist. But I don't personally think that there is any reason to disavow or completely not use any part of a specific path or philosophy just because you can't agree with all of it or don't agree with all of it. So I know that personally as a pagan, there are elements of Buddhism that I can and do use in my path. So I'm sure there are things that you're finding that work really well with your path as a pagan. And then there are probably those other things that aren't so much. And when you come across those things, my personal approach is always just to, you know, be aware of those things. Absolutely do your research and know everything that there is to know about these paths that you're drawing from, but then choose which things you're using and which things you aren't, and just know why you are choosing or not choosing certain things. Shinto is not something that I have so far studied a lot of in my path, so I'm less familiar with specifics and the details about what might fit well with paganism and what might not work as well for you. But I will say that also it depends on your definition of paganism whether or not Eastern philosophies are pagan. If you use the definition that it has to do with it being a polytheistic group of paths, then of course Hinduism would be included, but Buddhism wouldn't be, because Buddhism is not a deity-based path. Or if you use the definition that it's more like anything that is non-Abrahamic, then Buddhism and Shinto and all of those things do fall within that category. They're all just things that depend on the definition that you use, depends on what you personally feel an affinity with. So my best advice, I guess, would be to someone who's more just starting this kind of exploration of disparate paths and trying to form them together. My advice would be to learn as much as you can about the differing ways that these paths do things, and then try doing it each different way, which it sounds like Rain, the questioner, has already done. So this would be something that they are past. But for anyone else, my advice would be to do that and go ahead and try it and actually spend some time in those practices. And if you can, even go somewhere where they formally engage in those practices. Like, I know there's a Zen temple somewhat close to me, so sometime I would like to visit there and see what that's like. If you can do something like that, if you can go to a group, if you can go to a workshop, really engage in the practices that you're kind of questioning, and then practice those things mindfully and be thinking about it and journaling about it of what did I like about this, what did I not like about this, what works for me, what doesn't, what would I like to keep, and what could I maybe do away with and find something else to replace. For Rain, because it sounds like you are a little bit past that, you've been practicing it, so you are already sensing these conflicts and feeling like there are things that don't work well together for you. At that point, my best advice would be to examine what you like and dislike about each thing, because I'm sure there are pieces that, you really want to do this, but you also really want to do this, and they're not really working well together. So just examine those things and where that happens, and find out, really think about what it is that you think doesn't jive well, and think about why. Is it a fundamental part of the philosophies involved that don't mesh? Because if it is ever a case of holding two views that seem to be opposing at the same time, maybe you just need to do a little bit more thought on the subject to find out really what you think about it. Or maybe you'll find out that they're really not as opposing as they initially seemed, but they really can go together. Because I think there are so many things in this realm of subject matter that is not black and white, that are not black and white. And there's a lot of room for kind of not really knowing where you exactly lie on a certain issue. I don't think there's anything wrong with that as an evolving path, and it's a constant journey. I think it's okay to kind of, there are several subjects that I feel like, well, I think this makes sense, but I also think this makes sense, and we're just kind of trying to figure out where we are in all of it. So take a look at those things and find out, why do you not think that they work well together? Maybe they really do, or if they really don't, it's just a matter of finding what do you really like about each thing, and then what can you keep, what will work the best for you. I know some people who do different things at different times. It depends on the practice that you're doing, but one day they'll do it this way, and then another day they'll do it the other way, because of whatever the celebration is that they're doing, or whatever the exercise is that they're doing. Something else, practice-wise, makes the most sense. We don't know any intimate details about exactly what the practices are that you are struggling with and the philosophies that you're taking a look at, but no matter what it is, really, my advice is pretty much always to journal, take a look at what you're thinking about these things. As you think about them more, write it down, and then over time you can go back and look at how your thought process is evolving. That may not work for everyone. It might not be writing it down. You might want to record it on video. You might want to audio record it. You might want to do little notes in your phone or draw pictures, whatever helps document your journey through this thought process and finding out what is going to become your path or continue to be part of your path. And I'm always recommending that we question ourselves about all these things. Why do I feel this? Why do I like this? Or what is it about this that I like? What is it about this other thing that makes me feel uncomfortable? Questioning and writing down the answers and tracking that. And I feel that through that process comes the beginning of being able to find balance. And remember that balance doesn't have to mean that both sides are equally balanced, so to speak, the whole time. Balance isn't stagnation and staying still. Balance is one side being a little heavier and then the other side being a little heavier and sort of wavering back and forth. That is at least when we speak of balance in spiritual or religious terms, because perfect balance, of course, means being perfectly balanced. But even when you balance something on your finger, it doesn't stay perfectly still. It wavers a little bit. It goes back and forth. It is balanced, but you can move with it. It goes back and forth, and it rights itself almost. It comes back to an equilibrium, but it's not always right there. So don't forget that about balance. Don't feel like it has to be all the time. There are days when you feel balanced, there are days when you feel out of balance. You always kind of come back to it, or it's the coming back to it that you strive for. Not ever being constantly too much to one side, but being able to go back and forth. So that's what I have for you this week. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.